Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we have a very special car being a first generation BMW X5. And in particular, this is my first generation BMW X5. Let's get into it. The BMW E53 X5, as BMW designated it, was the first generation model of the popular BMW SUV. This was the very first SUV too that BMW built, and they actually called it the SAV for Sport Activity Vehicle. Now this car was produced from 1999 up until 2006, and they produced almost 500,000 units of this car. Reason number one is the powertrain on this car. So the BMW E53 X5 had a plethora of powertrains available, and many of that is due to the fact that this car was produced during which many called the golden age of BMW. This is when we saw the E46 3 Series, the E78 7 Series, and many other great BMWs from this generation. As a result, there were many different powertrain options that did come available for the E53 X5. In particular, this is the 3-liter BMW X5 powered by the M54 engine, and it was making around 234 horsepower when it was new. And mated to this car is a 6-speed automatic transmission. However, pre-facelift versions from 2004 and prior had a 5-speed automatic. There were also several different engine options available. And reason number two would be the styling of the BMW E53 X5. Now, I really like the styling of this car as it looks distinctive even to this day, and I feel like SUVs are actually making a trend more towards how this generation looked, with actually some more boxy lines, etc. Now, this car of course came from the time when BMW had acquired Land Rover, and as a result, this car took a lot of design cues from the Range Rover at the time, and I've always considered it almost a cousin of the E53 X5. Number three being the time period for which this car was built. This car was built almost 20 years ago, which is crazy to believe, but during the early 2000s, there really was a healthy mix of analog and technology in cars that I feel after this generation really did start to shift more towards the technology side of the cars. But this was really a sweet spot for the design of BMWs, as there was a lot of great technology, luxury amenities, while still maintaining the analog feel of these cars from this generation. I also loved the gauge cluster from this generation of BMW. It was just very simple, very German, and it looks amazing to this day. And this was seen in many different generations and made slight changes over time, but you could even see this gauge cluster was very similar in the original E53 series. That's how long BMW used this gauge cluster. And every BMW of this generation wouldn't be complete without this random slider they had. You of course had normal AC controls, but you also had this almost auxiliary switch here that you'd switch between heat and cold. And to this day, it's strange how it works. I don't know why they put them in these cars, but it was a very German thing. And speaking of luxuries, this car really did have some great luxuries for its time, including an actual heated steering wheel and a power tilting wheel. In 2006, that was unheard of. You also even got a panoramic sunroof. And the rear seats also took a lot of cues from the front, being that they had a lot of luxury features for the time, including tilting powered seats so you could recline in the rear of the car. You also had an ashtray because, of course, in 2006, in the German mind, your kids would need to smoke cigarettes on the way to school. You also had sunshades so that you could take out and not look at the plebeians in your amazing E53 X5. You had rear climate control vents at the time, which is still a very nice feature that some cars to this day do not have. You had, of course, cup holders in the rear, and actually substantial cup holders for the time. And there was another feature in the E53 X5 that was just very strange and very, very BMW of its era, which is this little piece right here. And you might say, what the heck is this? And what this was is you could actually put your skis in here. So being an active BMW person, you could put your skis in here and then have it stick out without scratching anything in the car. This is something a very BMW era of this time, and you did see it in other cars as well, and I don't think there's really been anything since this that ever came again. And one of my all-time favorite things about this generation of BMW was, of course, it had a tailgate. This is something that many BMW generations of the X5 had after this, and I don't believe the newest generation does have it, but this is a great feature to have, and a lot of SUVs just don't have it anymore. And in the trunk area, you also got two different 12-volt outlets. Of course, there was no real plug-in style outlet, but you did have the car generation style. And taking a look under the car, there was even a full-size spare tire. This one is dirty, but there was a full-size spare tire, which is a very nice thing to have. And the fourth reason for what makes the BMW E53 such a great car is, of course, the way this car drives. I mean, this is just a fantastic driving car. They took a lot of what made the E39 so great with its chassis and basically just stuck an SUV on top of it. And as a result, what it really brought was an SUV that had a lot of the characteristics and driving styles of a much smaller car, and really did bring in that generation of a sporty SUV. And that's what really does make this such a great little car. What's crazy is this actual car is a little bit smaller than the current generation BMW X3, but this car does handle very nimbly for its size, and this has that hydraulic steering from this era of BMW, and as a result, it has pretty heavy steering, which I like in a car. It really does give it a really unique driving style that I think people, and especially even enthusiasts, will like from an SUV. Now, as I mentioned, this particular model is the 3-liter inline 6, and it is by no means a speed demon. It is not very fast, but it makes decent power, and especially for its time, 234 horsepower was pretty good in 06. Now, I've never personally driven the V8 models, but I've heard they are extremely very fun to drive, so I would love to at some point get behind the wheel of a V8 version of this car. So to really summarize, this is a great driving car, and I think in terms of even how it drives compared to the newer SUVs that BMW makes, this is just a much more raw analog feel for an SUV from BMW. And I think that's what people really will like about these cars as time goes on and we move more towards electric cars and less from the era that defined what these cars did and the hydraulic steering and that kind of thing. So I think as time goes on, this really will continue to be seen as a future classic for BMW. So let's get into the final reason. And last but not least, the final reason I think the BMW E53 X5 is such a great car and the best BMW X5 generation is to do with the actual legacy that this car gave. Now, when this car came out, purists hated it. They said BMW is killing everything they stand for by making an SUV. And the nature of our market is SUVs are popular, and this car really did start a lot of this powerful segment of cars, and SUVs in particular. So whether you like it or hate it, the BMW X5 started a very important chapter of BMW's history, and I think as time goes on, this car will be looked upon as a future classic because it really did herald in the new generation of BMW and their SUV forms. And while this one did retain a lot of the classic stuff that enthusiasts did like about BMWs. And so that, my friends, is why I love the BMW E53 X5 and think it will be a future classic of BMW. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day.